Hi, welcome to our Highline School District Librarians Digital Media Literacy Podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Miss SL from Sylvester.
I'm Ms. McSheehy from Evergreen High School.
I'm Miss Gunn from Highline High School.
And I'm Miss Sylvester from Chinook Middle School.
And today we're going to continue with our discussion about digital citizenship, and we're going to focus on some more specifics because this is a passion project for us, for all of us. And, there are so many big picture things to talk about that sometimes, we need to stop and focus in on the things that we can be doing. So today we're going to focus on some things like think before you post, which, yes, is another acronym. I know Highline loves its acronyms. We're going to talk about managing some passwords, and if we have time, online conversational norms, because all of our conversations are online right now. So if anybody would like to jump in, or I can share what that fabulous think acronym stands for. I'll start there. So one of the things that librarians feel very strongly about, and everyone should, is that when you're sharing information, and this goes back to the digital citizenship part we've talked about before, you are a provider of information and you have a responsibility to the people who might read that information. So think is an acronym that I don't know who came up with the think acronym. I should research that. But it stands for T is it true? H, is it helpful? I can have two meanings. Is it inspiring? Or the cautionary I is it illegal? Are you posting, something that doesn't belong to you, or without giving attribution, or that is just not good information? N, is it necessary? And finally, my favorite, K, is it kind? So it's just a quick way to remember what some of the things you should be looking for before you share any information in a public forum should have.
So Ms. McSheehy and I have talked in the past about how every time teachers send students online, it's a good practice to have a mini lesson on digital citizenship or digital literacy. And this is one of those, just like this is our expectation for online behavior, right? Like that we expect that this is how you behave online in a Google Classroom, in a Padlet. If I send you out into the world to go tweet, like this is what the expected behavior is. And so I love this like acronym because, just think for a moment. You don't need to, once you hit it hard the first time, you don't necessarily need to come back all the time, but it's just a good reminder that ethical behavior anywhere is what we need to behave, how we need to behave.
I really appreciate the example that you just gave, Ms. Nesher, about Padlet, because I think a lot of times, and I think I fall into this trap too, when hearing the think before you post, I think my initial brain goes to like social media and sort of outside of school behaviors. So I think that's a really important connection to make, that, it's a behavior in lots of different digital settings, whether it's a Padlet that's shared, within your class, whether it's something social media that's more public than that, whether it's, Jamboard, that's another way that we're like collectively, or a shared Google Doc. Like there's all sorts of ways that we are in sort of public digital spaces where we're putting something out there. So I appreciate that reminder of that this makes sense in all of those settings. And it's not something that's separate from students' school lives.
Right.
Agreed. And can I just add to that, Ms. Gunn, because we were having this conversation in my school the other day. The Zoom chat has become notorious. And I'm not talking about among students. I'm talking about among some adults, as here's where I'm gonna share my real thoughts about something. and we've talked about this before, that sort of sense of anonymity that people seem to think they have, even though we can see your name, we can see your face, or if you are a responsible digital citizen, we know that it's you're taking credit and responsibility for what you're sharing. But people still sometimes seem to think that it gives them some sort of shield or wall to be not their best selves. But I also kind of wish we could say, let's use think for anything we put into the world, even if we're just talking to someone.
I agree.
Miss Kelly, you were going to say something, but you were
Oh,
muted.
I'm sorry.
I was muted. Yeah, some of us have learned that the hard way because, several years ago when I first started using Padlet and in middle school, and I'm like, oh, everyone's going to post something. I'm going to have it on the screen. And then all of these inappropriate things went up, and then I'm furiously trying to delete them, and because I didn't have that conversation, it dawned on me, yeah, we should be having that conversation anytime we're asking kids to publish whatever that looks like, their own thoughts and words. So yeah, learning that the hard way is a little embarrassing, and it's very flustering.
It is. I think we easily, when we teach digital citizenship, fall into the trap of doing all the do's and do nots, like do not do this, do not do that. And I like the think acronym because it still stays pretty positive. Just remind you of this is how your best self is expected to behave, right? So yeah.
Yeah. And again, we've talked about this a little bit with, and I don't know if it's in this space because we talk a lot, everyone. The librarians like each other. I just want you to know that. At least I do. I shouldn't speak for everyone. But we've talked about, what we're learning from just this whole distance learning experience, and people tend to focus on the negatives, but we should be sort of reorienting our thinking to focus on a lot of the positive things that are coming out of this, in terms of different tools and ideologies that maybe we've gotten away from, and being in a digital platform is bringing us back to. And again, the simplicity of think, sometimes, people are like, oh, that seems kind of elementary school or whatever, but it's not. I mean, we could spend several hours just on the T because truth is harder and harder to navigate these days. And then we can talk about like truthiness and post truth and all the sort of like fun buzzwords that are going on with it, but truly just identifying what is true, what makes something true. Fact versus opinion sounds like we're going back to elementary school, but it's essential to everything that we do. So, but
I think Ms. Gunn had a comment.
Yeah, please.
Oh, I don't know if this is going to feel relevant or not. I was this morning, but like while I was sort of thinking about what I would want to say today, I was talking to my partner, who one of the many things that he does is tech support for a digital software company. And I was asking him, since you interface with the public, through technology in a lot of ways, like what's something that you would want everybody to know? And it was making me think just now that the THINK acronym is true for, how we communicate with people, even if it's in a one-on-one setting as well, because sometimes the way people reach out for support is not necessarily following all of the THINK acronyms. So it's like, it's public information, it's one-on-one information, it's group information, and as you've said before, Ms. Mescher, just because we're in the digital world doesn't mean how we interact with fellow human beings should look different than it does in the real world, right? So just keeping all those things in mind through any kind of conversation. Yeah.
I think what is even, I don't know, it's not more important, but is even a stronger presence though, is that when it's online, it has a lasting effect. And, like when you were talking in person and, gossip or whatever, gossip can change and over time and can often be misleading, but also kind of dies down. Whereas something online, it feels like it has a lasting impression and it could be years out there. And I think sites like Snopes really helps to dispel those myths that perpetuate that maybe came out years ago, and they will circle back. So being aware of those sites, I know there's Snopes,
Fact check.
Fact
Yeah,
check,
factcheck.org.
PolitiFact,
Yeah.
yeah, that having those tools available for students and staff is really important, and a lot of people don't know about them.
Or aren't necessarily sure that they're okay to use. Like it almost feels like a cheat, right, to use a fact checking site. That makes me think of, I don't know, this is on our list of things today, but something that, we talk about a lot with students is knowing the source of your information, whether that's something that you have actively sought out through like a research method, or if it's something that's coming across your social media feed. But there is another acronym, because we do love those in education. There's the SIFT method, SIFT, that's around sort of fact checking, and I'm going to investigate the source. That's what the I is. So the S just stands for like stop. Be aware that you need to know things, right? But the I stands for investigate the source. And they have some like sort of tips and tricks for that. And using fact checking sites is definitely one of them. But the other like really simple trick that they offered that I admit I had a little bit of a like emotional response to initially was what he calls just add Wikipedia. So it's the idea of like, you find this article and you don't know, like you look and see who the source is, but it's an organization that you're not familiar with, that if you just do a quick search using Wikipedia to find out some basic information about the organization, that can like be some grounding for you. And I know like back in the day when Wikipedia was first a thing, like we in education were like, no, don't use Wikipedia. Like it's terrible. It's open source. Anybody can, And there are still ways in which using Wikipedia is both appropriate or not appropriate in the academic setting. But like there are some really fast and easy ways that students and adults can get information about sources, so that you at least have more to go on to make your own decision then about whether or not you feel like, for what your purpose is in that moment, is this a trustworthy thing? So I think using fact checking sites is one way of doing that, and using like that quick just add Wikipedia technique to like figure out, so you know what it is you're looking at before you go too far down a rabbit hole.
And I think if you are using the just add Wikipedia, it's just always important to remind, we use Wikipedia for this and not for this, or we use it here, like that it's content specific, and that's part of knowing the source, right? Like, or knowing what we're investigating. Are we investigating a false claim, or a claim, in which case we need to read broadly, we need to go multiple places, because Wikipedia, because of its comments, because of its editing method, can post fake claims just as easily as real claims, right? So that's part of the read broadly. So I've been telling students, go to at least 3 sources, like read broadly, read widely, because that's part of sifting, right? Like you just have to evaluate what you're looking at.
Right.
Make sure that it's true.
Oh yeah. No, I just wanted to say Wikipedia, in defense of Wikipedia. No, because Wikipedia, it used to be like, don't go there, but as a starting point, but never as an ending point. Your final source should not be Wikipedia. But Ms. Mesher, I wanted to bring up our new favorite phrase of reading broadly is be tab happy.
Yes, right. Exactly.
And that, that's lateral reading, but we were in a training, and the the facilitator used the phrase tab happy, and we were happy about tab happy.
We were like, yes, that's so on point. Like, it's a lot
Mhm.
to, like, I hear people say, oh, but that's so much to navigate. I'm like, we all navigate that way. Like, I myself right now have 2 browsers open, with each browser having 8 tabs, plus my iPad and my phone next to me, because I can't stay on the one thing. Like, if I'm researching, I have to go to multiple places. If I'm checking my webcam, I have, like, right now I'm in a Zoom meeting, like I have to have multiple things open to do my work. And if I'm limiting myself to one tab, then I'm not reading broadly, and then I'm not checking my source, and, and bringing it back to the teaching standards, then we're not doing a good job of reading complex literature or evaluating literature or informational text. Like, you have to be able to read broadly, tab happy, and there are tools for managing tabs.
But I
I think,
will, nope, Ms. McSheehy, go ahead.
One thing I just wanted to throw out there about Wikipedia is that there have been studies that demonstrate that Wikipedia's editors are super fast at noticing and changing any edits that happen in one of the entries, and they're actually faster than like the New York Times in catching purposeful or not purposeful mistakes. So but also I think one thing that that most people tend to do is, when they are reading laterally, is that they are looking for information to confirm what they already think, rather than broadening their sources. And I mean, I think we all fall into that habit. We go to our sources that we know are going to confirm what we already believe. And we just have to learn to open more tabs and finding other sources that maybe don't confirm, that maybe make us angry, but it also will cause us to dig a little bit deeper.
Mhm.
One of the other points that is made in the SIFT method is often what we find initially is, especially what we find through like general internet searching, is reports on reports, or reports on a study, or somebody talking about a report on a report on a report, right?
Mhm.
So like it's that trickle down effect. And so how do we also then backtrack ourselves as much as possible to the original place where the information came from, which also feels a little overwhelming, but maybe that's where partly having like multiple tabs comes into play too, right? Of like, okay, I saw this thing cited, now I'm going to try and find that original source. So working your way back.
Yeah. And what I find also, which is a little disheartening, is those studies are hard to read. That students, and I do it too, tend to avoid those because there's so much to get through. And I think helping kids navigate through those with some reading strategies is really important in understanding why we need to look at those studies. And this is one way that you don't have to read the whole thing. Skimming, scanning, understanding the text features that are there that can really outline the information for you, so you don't have so many words to get through. I think that's really important.
Yeah. And even just knowing who did the study, right? And learning about, maybe I can't read the whole thing, but I can learn about like who was in charge of it, what their method was, and make some, generalizations based on that too. But I agree, it can be very hard to read, especially if you're talking about scientific things, like whoosh.
I'm going to piggyback or make a plug for using ProQuest for reading studies, to teach students how to find an abstract so that they can read what it's about. Like,
Or they dive too deeply into,
before they dive too deeply, like this is an academic habit. And obviously there's a major difference between an academic habit for an academic research paper, or, hey, I read this sensational thing yesterday, and is this really true, right? Like, those are different. There's still research, but it's a different level of research. But too often we rely on just an internet search when we actually have multiple tools in our toolbox for this.
Should we go back to some other, we've kind of gone down a rabbit hole with the research.
sure.
Again, passion, right? But should we back it up to some other of the digital citizenship ideas that we were talking about to begin with?
Yeah, and I do apologize because truth is just going to keep coming up again and again and again. And
no need to apologize. It will forever.
Forever.
Yep.
But I didn't know if anybody wanted, since I did take us down the rabbit hole of truth, which is going to be the name of my memoir. I didn't know if we wanted to touch on any of the other letters and think a little more deeply helpful, inspiring, necessary kind.
I don't know that this ties directly to the acronym, but I was thinking when Kelly, you said something about like things have a longer lasting effect when they're online. That led me to think about like digital footprint, like what are we leaving behind online, whether we're aware of it or not. And there's different ways to think about that, but I actually do this one. I feel a little embarrassed to say, so I thought I would mention this one. Like one way of like seeing what your digital footprint is to Google yourself. And I think it's really interesting to see what does or does not come up in public spaces when you are looking up yourself. And it's not always, social media things don't always show up that way. And I do hear, I don't have proof of this, but I do hear that employers are starting to do things like check social media sites for things for candidates just to kind of see what's out there. But that's one thing that one can do real quick is Google yourself and see what you find.
Oh no, I just, sorry, my dog, again, timing is everything with my dog. I just did a lesson in a class recently where I brought in examples of people who have not only not gotten jobs, but lost jobs because of their employers seeing some of their social media posts. So it will stick with you. And, I love to talk about the fiction book, A Tale from a Time Being, because there's this whole idea of the resonance of things online. And in the book, they create a position called a cleaner for the internet and things posted online. And the sort of the book ends in a really happy place where they kind of pronounce that anonymity is the new celebrity. Like people knowing less about you is actually now more valuable than people knowing more about you. And I love that book anyway, but I just love that as we don't have the cleaner. So let's just tread very carefully.
When I think about digital footprint, in addition to Google yourself, I like to, the other way I like to talk about it is curate your online presence. Like a social media influencer's online presence is totally curated. Like they put forth a version of themselves. In the same way, we want to put forth a curated version of ourselves that we want the world to see. So future employer, grandparents, grandchildren, like we curate ourselves. And so I think just talking about it in that language also helps. Like it's a curated online self.
Yeah, and Ms. Mesher, I think that is really coming to light right now as we are becoming a society that is more aware of the inequities, and we talk about language, and we hear a lot of, but it was just a joke kinds of things from celebrities who are being called out for using their platform to deliver kind of hurtful messages. But we all need to be thinking in those ways, whether we're celebrities or not. Somebody else might see what we've put, and if it's hurtful rather than helpful, it will have an impact on someone.
I think it's also kind of like a credit score, that like actually having no credit score can be as potentially harmful as having a bad credit score. So I think that speaks to what Ms. Mesher was saying, is that like, I think it's really hard in today's age to not have some sort of digital profile. And so wanting to make it the most positive one it can be, and like that you are in charge of what it is versus allowing somebody else to be in charge of what it is, which I think is a challenge. I think maybe in terms of like if you are tagged in things. So like how do you have if I'm a teenager, how do I have a conversation with my friends about like, please don't tag me in stuff unless you ask? And I think about that with the people in my own life, right? Like I have some young people in my life, and like one of my nephews, like I took a picture of him and I was like, I need to ask him before I put it online, because that's me influencing what people might find about him. And, you know, I wouldn't put a picture of him doing something bad online, but like, it's still like, I shouldn't be sharing other people's stuff without making sure it's okay with them first. And I think that is, you know, potentially puts teens in an awkward position to have those conversations with friends that like, I never had to have those because any pictures I took went into a photo album that I was the only person who saw, right? Like, but that's a really different world.
Unless you got duplicates.
Fair.
No, I think that really came to the fore with mommy blogs. Like, I think that as mommy blogs, like, developed online presences as their children were growing up and realized, hey, I actually cannot post these pictures of my children because these will never go away. Or my child has been made a victim of a meme that I had no control over, and I can't, and their online presence has been, you know, destroyed. And so I think, yeah, just our awareness of tagging other people has grown with our understanding of social media.
No, and I thank you for saying that too, because, you know, in a school district, we also need to be educating the whole family on digital literacy. And Ms. Mesher and Ms. Gunn, you pointed out beautifully, you know, teens are older and they are taking control of, or should be, of their identity online, but also we need to let parents know, especially with some of our younger constituents in Highline, that, you know, just because it's your kid doesn't mean you get to decide how they'll be seen online for the rest of their lives. And yeah, there have been some pretty cruel memes in the world. There's this whole like concept now of parents having a third watch, where not only do they have to have the first watch where they make sure their kids are okay during the day, the second watch where they make sure their kids are okay, you know, out in the world, but the third watch that they're okay online. And we need to kind of help educate with that too, because yes, it's okay as a teen or a preteen to be having conversations with your family saying, please don't post that picture of me in the bathtub when I'm 3 online, but the 3-year-old can't say that. So we have to say it for them. So can we also agree that we're not going to get past Think today, and we're just going to have to talk about managing passwords and online conversational norms next time, because
managing passwords is part of Think.
Well, that's
so I'm just gonna say it. It's
okay. Just go.
All encompassing, because managing passwords,
it's hard.
It is so hard. But keeping your own information private is one way that you can manage your account and make sure that the things that are coming out from you are actually what you want to say. So, just
Can I say something that might be controversial?
Oh yes, Kirsten.
I think that the way we have some things set up in the school district does not necessarily give students the power to manage their passwords. And I understand from a like ease of usability and like not needing to help a kid remember their password 75 times every day, because I do that. Like I understand why there are some things that are designed the way that they are, but we are also not necessarily training our older students to be as wise about password usage as we could be, because it's frustrating, right? Like when everything that you use requires a password, like I am just as bad as the next person with like reusing the same password over and over again. And so I just think it's a really, it sounds so simple, but it's really challenging.
That was actually something I was surprised when I came to this district about how passwords are managed, because that was not the case in my other district. So it doesn't have to be this way, is what I'm saying, that kids can manage their own password.
I think when we are thinking about equity in technology and equity in digital literacy instruction, we need to be realizing that our students that we need to not underestimate their abilities. And we need to hold them to the same high level of digital literacy skills as their peers are held to in other school districts. And I think that when we talk about equity, what is equitable for a kindergartner is not what is equitable for a 12th grader. And so I think,
Right.
Yeah,
but
also these teaching about safety, you start young, and that should be true with online safety too. I mean, I've got to give a big shout out to our friends at the King County Library System, because when children get a library card, they are encouraged to create their own password, and they're given some clever prompts on the King County website to help them create difficult to crack passwords, but that will resonate with the I think it's like, you combine like a favorite color and a favorite animal and a number that's meaningful for you. I mean, it's just enough to start down that road of, let's be really thoughtful about our passwords, and we should be doing some of that too.
So when I did Miss
Yep.
Sorry, guys. Miss McSheehy often talks about needing mini lessons around digital literacy or digital citizenship, and I think this is one area where we can have mini lessons. We don't post password prompts or structures online because that's how passwords get compromised. We don't, like, you are old enough to know it and to change it. And if you change it, you got to remember it. So here's how to keep it secret. Here's how to keep it safe. I think those are all.
And also, just as adults, like tips and tricks, what do we do?
Right.
How can we impart, especially with high school? I mean, they're going on to have bank accounts. They could have, car loans and credit cards where you have to log in, and how do we manage as adults? And that two-factor authentication is really important. And where do they learn about that?
Yeah, and I've heard adults say, "Oh, the two-factor authentication, that's an extra step. I don't want to do it." And we've got to change that attitude too, because it's like, yeah, it's another thing, it's another click, it's another hassle, whatever, but it's also another layer of safety. So
I think it also, I think many of these reactions are more common from adults than from students, because we did not grow up with online technologies. And for all of us, it's a constant relearning best behavior, right? And students, I think when you explain the why, they're like, oh yeah, I don't want 2-factor, I want 7-factor. I had a student a couple of years ago who had 7-factor authentication. It was like insane watching him enter his passwords. But it's just, when you explain the why, students are like, oh yeah, clearly this is why I wanted. And I think sometimes as educators, we put our own prejudices on how we disseminate information or how we teach others. And I think we don't need to underestimate our students.
So.
Agreed. And I think, I hate to say it, guys, but I think that has to be it for me today.
Yep.
I think that has to be it for,
but
once again,
that's a good note to end on.
Right. Once again, Miss Meshter, and Miss McSheehy picked the perfect note to end on. So You all are amazing. That's all I can say.
As are
right.
you, Miss SL.
You are Miss SL.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, guys.